TFM.
Welcome back, everyone, to Saddle Up, our dedicated Strange New Worlds podcast. I'm Christopher Jones, and with me, as he always is my esteemed co-host, Matthew Rushing. And Matthew, I was at a yard sale this weekend, and I found these really cool phones. So I thought we could just wire the studio today and record this show, good old 1980s radio call-in style.
Well, Chris, that sounds wonderful. Are we going to be joined by Fraser Crane? Because that would be awesome.
Yeah. We should do an episode.
I've always wanted to call
like
into
that.
a radio show, and be on the air. So
yeah, well, this is your big chance. So yes, everyone, we're going to continue season 3 of Strange New Worlds today with episode 6, The Sehlat Who Ate Its Tail. And here's a quick rundown of the story. During a survey mission to Helicon Gamma, Commander James T. Kirk of the USS Farragut thinks it would be a good idea to put boots on the ground and explore the world firsthand. Think again. Just as he pitches the idea to his Vulcan captain, the planet is vaporized by an incredibly powerful weapon fired from a ship that looks like a giant sea creature. With most of the crew, including Captain Varel, injured, Kirk takes command of the Farragut. His first time in the chair under pressure takes a life-or-death turn when the Enterprise is captured by space pirates and swallowed by the beast. He must overcome his crisis of confidence and rise to the occasion to save both ships, a tall task aided by a group that will one day become his own trusted crew. So, Matthew, we are getting a glimpse of an early Kirk. We've watched Paul Wesley off and on over the first couple of seasons kind of try to settle into this role. But here, it's interesting to give us a glimpse that we've never seen on screen, anyway, of what Captain Kirk might have been like before he became the Captain Kirk that we know, and some of the things that might have influenced his command style.
yeah, I mean, I think the way that this episode portrays it, this is supposed to be the first time that we ever see Captain Kirk in the chair in a crisis situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, of course, a really interesting thing for this show to do. First and foremost, as we talk about this idea, though, of Kirk finding his way, I do think that the first thing that has to be mentioned really is because we talked about this before, right? When we had the episode in the holodeck. This idea about the way that the character is being played and the way it's being portrayed. And I think that it seems to be kind of leaning into, at some points, the worst tropes possible when it comes to the idea of who Captain Kirk is. And then at other times, it seems to like really reel that back and, give us a much more nuanced and interesting portrayal of the character. And I think that it's my opinion that as they're trying to figure this out, when it's working best is when they're not leaning into the kind of stereotypical Kirk, and they're just letting him be his version of Kirk.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most interesting thing about this episode. First and foremost, when we talk about this idea of having Kirk be in the chair for the first time, is that there are places where the portrayal is so interesting and nuanced and really fascinating portrayal of this character who's being thrust into this position. And yet at the same time, there's this whole other side where it's like, oh, we're leaning into like kind of the worst ideals of what Kirk supposedly is. And, if you watch TOS and you watch the films, right, and Kirk is a much more nuanced and interesting character, and
well, in the films for sure,
yeah,
because he's a much older character.
Well, true, but I'm just saying, the show too. I mean, gosh, I think you really do have a pretty nuanced character. So to me, there's an unbalance here, and I think my biggest desire is that they would just allow him, and all the directors would pull him back from ever doing just his impersonation of William Shatner, and the writing would stop doing that and just allow him to be his version. Because, again, comparatively, the only other Kirk we've ever had, right, is what we saw from the Kelvin timeline. Mm-hmm. And in that, Chris Pine just brings his natural charm and uses that to be Kirk. And Paul Wesley, I think, has that charm, but the writing so many times is leaning into this like idea of what everybody kind of in their mind makes of the worst version of Kirk. And I think that sometimes gets in the way of allowing actually Paul Wesley just to shine as this character and find his own way as this character. And so again, that there's an unevenness in that sense of this Kirk portrayal.
Yeah. Well, I feel the unevenness as well, for sure. But in the holodeck episode, a Space Adventure Hour episode, I mean, that was obviously supposed to be an homage, I guess they would call it, whereas I would call it a parody of William Shatner. So that one I don't really think about at all. In previous times we've seen Paul Wesley on here, I would say there are moments. I'd have to go back and watch the episodes again to really refresh my memory on the specific moments, but there were moments where maybe I felt like he was kind of trying to parrot the Kirk we know a little bit here and there and not succeeding at it. In this episode, I didn't really feel that way, although I felt the unevenness that you're talking about. I think, well, you mentioned Chris Pine. So the thing, Kirk as a character, I think has to be one of the most difficult characters in TV or film history for someone else to step in and play that part. If you look at
it would be like somebody else trying to be Indiana Jones.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's another good example. Like if you look at Spock, Leonard Nimoy, of course, is Spock to me. He's the classic Spock. But I also felt that Zachary Quinto did a good job with Spock. I think Ethan Peck does an excellent job with Spock. That character, by the nature of the character, is easier for someone to step into. I also think, Martin Quinn is doing a really good job with Scotty on this show. I think Kirk is just a really difficult character because of the charisma that William Shatner had and what he brought to that character. Now, Chris Pine in the Kelvin universe, I think did a really good job with Kirk because he has kind of the same charisma that Shatner has. It's a little bit different, but they both have this similar type of confidence and presence, and they are who they are on the camera.
Yes.
And so no one can imitate that. And I don't think Paul Wesley has tried to imitate that. I think that it feels odd for us as viewers, especially those of us like you and me who have been watching since the original series, was in reruns anyway, to warm up to anyone else playing Kirk, especially when all the other characters, Uhura is really good on this show as well. All the other characters they feel closer, I think, to what we would expect for those characters. So Paul Wesley's Kirk really stands out as being different from the Kirk that we know. I think he's a really good actor. I think he does a good job with the material that they're giving him. But it does feel a bit off, I would say.
Well, and I think I'll just say one thing real quick. I think the one place there's just a couple places where the writing itself is what. Well,
that's what I wanted to ask you.
Parody.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to ask you because you mentioned like particular moments or issues like that in here. So what are examples here that you felt like were treading into the parody territory a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's really the beginning is a big part of that, where, you know, Kirk is like, "What is a star date?" And it's just Okay, so
sure.
that is absolutely a spot where that's terrible writing. That line should have been cut. It again, it's a parody line. It's not a helpful line.
Mm-hmm.
I also just even think of, I don't know if the portrayal of Kirk is necessary. And this is the thing. Like, look, I'm going to say this, but at the same side, I believe this is a totally different universe, so I don't need it to connect. So Kirk kind of being somebody who is ready to be in the chair, thinks he's ready to be in the chair, and basically needs the lesson that of humility, of actually, I'm not better than anybody else, and maybe I've still got things to learn, I think is a great lesson. And there was a part of me that, as I was watching the episode, thinking, the Kirk we know from the original series is somebody who was not like that, right? He was a stack of books. That's what he's called, you know, as just being out of the academy and being, you know, he is somebody who, it feels like, truly kind of actually learned what it meant to be on the frontier on the Farragut, in that sense. Like, that kind of formed him into the person who then takes over the Enterprise, and this person who, yes, is willing to take risks, but he's also the person who, like, cares deeply about his ship and his crew. Like, they are the most important things in the world to him. Like, there's nothing more important in the universe to that. And this is a Kirk, again, who's, like, learning those lessons. And so there were just a couple of places where it just felt like the writing itself was leaning into that a little bit too hard. When it wasn't, that's where I felt Paul Wesley was really able to shine as Kirk. And I don't want anybody to think, as we're having this conversation, that I did not like this episode. This could possibly be the best episode of the season so far. And
I think so.
Part of that is, I think that this is, and we're going to talk about it later, but man, this is the high watermark, in the sense of, this is the type of stuff where Strange New Worlds is shining when it does real Star Trek, when it really leans into writing a Star Trek story about Star Trek characters and Star Trek events. And part of that was actually even just the way in which, you know, if we're going to kind of work towards, you know, Kirk being in the chair in the last episode of the series, allowing these characters all to meet and kind of have their first interaction together, that are going to be really core members of Kirk's crew. I think that's great. You know, so, and Paul Wesley is a big part of that, because actually, again, I like him. I think he's good. I think he's a good actor, and I enjoy his Kirk. I loved his interaction with Spock. You know, I thought it was wonderful, his interaction with the rest of the crew, where he starts to do that very Kirk thing, is like, okay, what do we know? You know, and everybody gives them their answer. And then Kirk comes up with this ridiculous idea that, like, he's like, I hope you guys are sitting down, because this is ridiculous.
But it did give us a wonderful reaction from Jess Bush of, so this is where the plan gets crazy.
Yes.
That
all
was
of that
so
was
well
fantastic.
Delivered.
Yes, exactly. So that's the stuff where, again, like, I think him kind of then having this incredibly important lesson on what it means to be a captain and have to make the most difficult decisions, right? And have to then live with those decisions,
right,
is awesome. Again, that's kind of quintessential Star Trek, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I see the points that you're talking about, and I'm not sure that I think they were written to be parody, but I can see how they might come across that way. I think Paul Wesley has the most difficult job on this show in trying to portray Kirk, more so than anybody else on this show. It's such a difficult thing, and I think most of the time he does well with it.
Agreed, yeah.
So let's talk about the premise, though, of what you've already outlined a lot of, is that what this show gives us is a glimpse into that time between the academy where Kirk was described as a stack of books and he was supposed to be very, very studious. And then the Kirk that we see later on in the original series, who is a bit more adventurous and he'll break rules when he needs to, but he's not, Kirk in the original series is not the rebel, I think, that a lot of people think of him as, right? Yes, of course he's not afraid to violate the rules and not do things by the book when necessary, but he's not like that all the time. It depends on the situation. But I think what happens in this episode, in moments, as you mentioned, is that, and we've seen this with other aspects of Strange New Worlds and Kirk and different characters, is that the writers seem to be influenced a lot by the Kelvin films.
Oh,
and
yes.
You see that in Kirk, right? They're taking cues for Kirk from the Chris Pine Kirk, not the William Shatner Kirk.
Yeah.
And so when they start writing this background, while they're not necessarily writing the Kelvin universe Kirk, I feel like they see the younger Kirk more like the young Chris Pine, who gets in the fight in the bar, and then Pike challenges him to join Starfleet. And I think they see a little bit more of that, whereas what would be more interesting would be to see Kirk not be as quick to want to jump and take risks and to learn along the way that sometimes you need to.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, and look, this is just where the show itself just feels so much more like it's a version of the Kelvin timeline and in a different universe, because it just doesn't feel like the Prime universe Star Trek, which is fine, because I love the Kelvin timeline films for what they are and the way in which they are able to do their own thing. And this makes, then, I think, for a more interesting story then, to allow these characters to go in all these different directions that aren't what we saw previously. And that's the whole point of kind of like doing a different universe, right? Because you don't have to be beholden to other things, and you can just do your own thing. And so, yeah, I mean, if you want to utilize that more as that type of basis for your characterization of Kirk, I think that's fine. And again, that's what I'm finding interesting, is just where they're going with this character and all of that. And because I don't care whether or not it fits with the rest of the Prime timeline, it makes for an interesting story. And I've got to say, again, the last two episodes here are really shining in ways that make me excited to actually continue with this season. Whereas, I wasn't thinking that was going to be the what I thought just a few episodes ago. And so I'm really glad that we're getting this type of storytelling.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about bringing the TOS crew together, because the way Kirk is portrayed, playing off Spock in particular, I thought was a nice little progression to start setting up the relationship between the two of them and the influence that Spock will have on Kirk as he matures into a captain. We even get things like, the tridimensional chess, which, of course, we saw in Where No Man Has Gone Before. We see Kirk and Spock playing for the first time, because that was actually the first episode that was shot after The Cage, even though it wasn't the first that aired. But, we get these moments of interactions that feel familiar, and you can see the seeds of where that relationship is going to go. And also the advice that Spock gives Kirk. Spock is able to come to Kirk and say, yeah, I know you're having a crisis and you're unsure of yourself, but you still have to lead. Somebody's got to make a decision. You're the captain. And he's able to pull Kirk up and bring him back into the situation. And then Kirk does his Kirk thing where he comes up with a plan. But I also found the Scotty-Kirk dynamic to be very interesting because I had never really thought about how Scotty might react to Kirk prior to what we know of them together on the original series, where they have this great relationship and Kirk can rely on Scotty to get them out of whatever situation they're in because he's a miracle worker. Now, they did drop the line in here, it's time for you to start working some miracles, whatever. So that was a little bit kind of like, I know it's a reference to what's to come, just like the risk is why we're out here moment as well, that foreshadows something Kirk will say in the original series. But Scotty being here, where you get the strong feeling here that Scotty has had a lot more experience than Kirk has out in space, on ships, having to figure out how to get out of situations, make quick decisions, come up with plans. And here, when Scotty is in a situation where he has to respect the chain of command to Kirk as captain, there's this sort of tension there where Scotty isn't sure he wants to follow what Kirk wants to do. And finally, Kirk pulls himself together and says, we're definitely going to rescue everyone on the Enterprise. And Scotty says, thank you, I needed to hear that. And it's moments like that which I thought were interesting and important for showing us how the crew who will eventually crew the Enterprise come together and start to get to know each other and start to figure out how to work together.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. I think that watching Scotty as a character here has been one that I don't know if we necessarily expected him to have this type of story, that he would be, this different as a character, one who felt so unsure of himself. And I really enjoy the way in which he's being portrayed here, where, again, he's also having to learn who he is as a character and to become the person that we see later on down the road. And like you said, I think it's kind of beautiful to have him be this character who has had kind of a rough go of it and has felt responsible for that, and having to learn that, one, he doesn't have to do everything on his own, and that he needs to rely on the crew that is around him. So, yeah, I mean, again, this is the type of thing that if you're going to do this type of show, this is this type of stuff that we would expect to see. And I'm glad that we're actually getting to see it, even in a character like Scotty, who, doesn't get a ton of screen time in other places. He's there, but we don't know tons and tons about him as a character, and this show is allowing us to get to know more, which is pretty awesome. So I'm really glad of that.
Yeah, I felt like he came alive a lot more in this episode in terms of being a character. But I think it's largely because you've got a scene on the bridge where you've got Kirk, you've got Spock, Uhura, Scotty, Chapel. You've got them all together for, I think, maybe the first time we've seen all these characters together, right? I think back to, I can't remember the specific episodes, but we've had, bit by bit, we've had these scenes where we had Spock and Kirk together, and then we've got Spock and Kirk and Uhura together. And it's kind of like building up where we see familiar combinations of characters from TOS. And then finally in this episode, you've got this moment on the bridge where you almost felt like this could be a scene from the original series in a different reality, right? Where it's different from our reality, where there's a TV show called Star Trek, Not a Space Adventure Hour, in another parallel universe, and these are the actors who were cast. So I thought it was fun to see that as someone who grew up watching the original series as a kid, right?
Exactly, right. And as you mentioned earlier, that like this was one of the joys of the Kelvin timeline is giving that opportunity, freeing us up to tell these type of stories, letting us see these characters in ways that we had never seen them before. And that's what it feels like when we're at our best. We're getting that opportunity here in Strange New Worlds. And so I still have to say, you know, I don't want too many episodes like this at this point because I still want to be with the characters. Like there's that one moment there where La'an looks at Kirk and Spock is looking at La'an, and they're having this weird, interesting triangle happen between these characters. Yeah. And I want to see more of the Strange New World characters that we've created specifically for this show, especially like La'an. Well, and so I hope that in, you know, the next few episodes here, we really start to dig back into those characters, because
I think
as much as I did, I'm not complaining about this episode at all. I really like it. You're going to love my rating here if you love Strange New Worlds, folks. But I still would love to dive back into those characters because they deserve it, because they're the characters that we, you know, with all the changing of the guard at Paramount and everything, who knows what's going to happen. And in all honesty, I don't think we're going to see these characters again. So I want them to get their due in this show.
Right. Yeah. So I don't think we're going to see them again either. Yeah, that was a fun moment when they walk onto the bridge of the Farragut and La'an says, "James," and Spock kind of looks at her a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't know, the Spock, La'an didn't tell everybody what happened in Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, right?
No, I think if I remember correctly, the only one who really knows is number one.
Right.
Because I think she confided in her about what had happened, and they'd had a conversation about that a little bit, and not in full detail, but enough that it was kind of interesting. And of course, you know, she ends up contacting Kirk, and they become friends in this universe.
And there have been some moments where maybe Spock has seen them together, but just the reaction informed by the relationship that has been forming over the past few episodes really struck me as Spock being a little bit uncomfortable around the two of them together. But played in a super subtle way by Ethan Peck.
It's so good.
Yeah. Okay, well, talking about using the characters that were created for the show, I have been very happy the last two episodes that the writers have finally run out of excuses for why Pelia can't be in a meeting or help do stuff, and they're actually using her again. And here they did a great job of using Pelia and Scotty both as members of the engineering team. But the way they used Pelia here, I personally thought, I don't know how you feel about it. When I was watching it, I was thinking, I wonder what Matthew's going to think about this. But I thought it was really fun that they actually took the fact that she would have been living on Earth many, many years ago. And she says, maybe this is the first time that I'm glad I lived through the 1980s. And then they go to her quarters, which are absolutely insane. And she pulls out a box of old telephones, and they're going to wire the ship. And yes, I know it doesn't make any sense how you would run old telephone wires to the bridge and into the corridors and everywhere, and how people talk to each other on the telephone. But it doesn't matter, because I thought that it was a fun little touch in an otherwise heavy and serious episode, and it made sense for Pelia.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, utilizing her as a character, I think Pelia might actually be one of the worst served characters on this show. And I think it's partly because they don't know what to do with her. I also think it's clear that they have been saving money, and so we never get to go to engineering anymore.
Right.
And which is, it's a little bit frustrating. And so, but to make use of who this character is and her life experience of 5,000 years was fun. And she's an engineer, so of course she can make this work, you know?
Just imagine how long those cables have to be, though.
Well, yes.
There's some signal boosters on there.
If people had a problem with Riker and a joystick in Insurrection, they're going to hate this.
I know.
So,
look, this is the thing. People might think that the telephones are silly, but what's with the joysticks? Are there joysticks all throughout the ship and they just pop out of the walls?
Yeah. Well, I got the feeling that she had rigged that up.
I hope so.
That they
she did have an
that.
Atari 2600, but she
exactly.
had like the upgraded joystick that you would use for Zaxxon or something like that, right?
Yeah. So anyway, no, I mean, it was fun to be able to do that. And like you said, I think it kind of creates a little bit of levity for an otherwise heavy episode. I mean, that, and we saw the TARDIS in the background. So apparently the humans had captured TARDIS, the TARDIS.
The TARDIS.
Which, with the Doctor, the definite article. So.
So anyway, I really enjoyed that part of the episode. It was funny that Ortegas has the line, "Is this a personal massager?"
That line felt a little bit too off color for Star Trek.
It did. Yeah.
It was way over the line. And I chuckled, but I was also like, dang, I was wow.
I was a little surprised
actually
they put that in.
That was yeah.
Maybe
Anyway,
this episode is
better.
sponsored by Spencer Gifts.
Exactly. Exactly. So
the other thing I was thinking of, though, is that when Pelia was officially assigned to the Enterprise and she actually moved the ship, how long did the Enterprise have to delay its departure from space dock so they could move all her crap onto the ship? It's unbelievable how much stuff she has in her quarters.
I think it took 84 years. So, yeah.
Yeah. She'll be like, I remember when they first started moving those boxes. Yeah. All right. Well, okay. So back to the serious stuff here. This did catch me off guard. The twist ending, where we find out that all the people on this ship are actually humans. Now, the explanation, on the one hand, kind of defies logic. So it's a group of climate scientists who all leave because they think that the climate change problem can't be solved. And so they're just going to leave Earth and go out. And so I get the idea that people would leave Earth and try to find new places for humans to live, because eventually we're going to have to do that, right? I mean, this planet is not going to be here forever, so eventually we're going to have to do that. So on the most basic level, I can go with it. But the idea that it wasn't a group of engineers, it was a group of climate scientists, and somehow their descendants built this gigantic spaceship that became a legend throughout the alpha and beta quadrants as being the monster on the edge of the map. That I don't, that part it's like a huge leap from the concept of why they left Earth to what they became. But I did like the basic message and the lesson that is set up by the reveal, and what we as viewers can debate and discuss and learn from what they've set up. The idea that when you start treating others truly as others, not as people, then that's where things can go so wrong. Because Pike asks the question of how do they get from who they were to what they've become?
Yeah. Okay. So, I'll tackle first is who these people are. Yes, they're people who are worried that the climate is never going to recover after World War III, and so therefore instead of trying to save this world in any way, shape, or form, we're just going to run away with the best and the brightest of humanity and try and save something. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I got a huge problem with this. One is that I think that this really, and I actually kind of like maybe where this episode makes us think, but it's like, you can't run away from your problems because wherever you go, there you are. And you're just going to bring your problems with you because really, actually, you're probably the problem. Mm-hmm. And so I think that this issue is so much what we see in our world, where we see people who are trying to run away from their problems or their lives or their country or the world at large, right? Mm-hmm. But in the end, the only way we're going to make any changes is by doing the hard work of making the change. Mm-hmm. And we have to, what's the phrase? Be the change you want to see. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. It also just didn't make sense in any way, shape, or form that this kind of expedition after World War III would be able to get off the ground before even warp drive. It does not make sense that there is a arrowhead insignia on this ship. Makes zero sense because that's traditionally been known as having something to do with the warp drive formula, and that's
that could be there because they've captured a Starfleet ship, and it's a remnant of it.
I mean, I don't think so because I thought that was supposed to originally be their original ship. So
are you talking about the one that has the American flag on the side?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at that again because I didn't notice the arrowhead on there. I know that there are a lot of...
Yeah, it's there, but it's sideways, and it's like, okay, that makes zero sense.
Maybe they did a spacewalk, and they had an art project, and they painted it. They're like, that ship we captured the other day? I love that little arrowhead symbol. It'd look great on the side, wouldn't it?
Maybe. I don't think that's the case.
I told you, Spencer Gifts. It's a decal, Matthew. They slapped it on the side. I think it's another
spot where they think they're being clever, but they're not. So...
In this case, I think they're just throwing everything that they can in, like the TARDIS being there, right? And the Klingon D7 and all this stuff, yeah.
But I think that, the twist ending, of course, the biggest part of it is that it allows Kirk to be able to have this moment of reflection, right?
Yeah, and, that's the point.
And it teaches him this lesson. And like you said, the lesson is that we can't other people. And even if it's our enemy, we need to be able to see our enemies as people.
Yeah.
And that is going to be able to help us hopefully maybe get to a place where we don't have to be enemies. And so all of that part was great. I think the writing here seems... to do itself a disservice. I think it would have been much more interesting if this had been a group of humans that had left maybe prior to World War III because they saw it coming, and that would have been much more interesting and made much more sense. But yeah, to take the best and the brightest from Earth at a time that it needs them the most, I mean, I would call these people cowards because, that's when you're most needed. If you're going to actually fix the problems you see in the world, the only way to do that is going to be through people stepping up and doing the hard work, and so...
Yeah. I mean, I think the ultimate point of it was, like you said, for Kirk to be able to have this moment of realization that... and have that discussion with Pike, because... Pike telling him that there's going to be all these decisions that you're going to have to make and you're going to have to live with it. And whatever the outcome is, you're going to have to live with that as well. It does start to inform who Kirk will become. And I think that was the ultimate point of it. And then I think they wrote maybe to set it up, or maybe because they had some other ideas, they threw in things like climate change, which is a big topic today. Well, it's been a big topic for decades and decades, but especially today, because now we're actually feeling the impact of the temperature changing more than we did in the past. but it's a big topic anyway. It's a timely thing right now. So they throw that in. World War III, of course, is a touchstone. It's an event in Star Trek history that a lot of things are built around, whether it be from things related to the original series or even things like Q putting Picard and the Enterprise D crew on trial in a court that was post World War III and stuff like that. So it's something that's very familiar within Star Trek. So it makes sense to mention it. It also makes sense to mention it in today's world where, we're closer than we have been in a long, long time to World War III and some kind of catastrophic conflict and global war. So throwing all these things in, it pushes buttons of what people are thinking about today, but it also clutters the message at the end, and not just the message, but the point within the story of Kirk. It throws a lot of stuff into that where it could have been more focused, where he's really just focused on the idea of, hey, I killed 7,000 humans and I made that decision. Was it the right decision? Was it the wrong decision? He has that talk with Pike, which I thought was all excellent. I thought was a really good scene. And they were trying to do a whole lot at the end of the episode, whereas maybe if that reveal had come, and I don't think you would do it in this particular story, but if you think about the story being somewhat different and you have this reveal a bit earlier where you have more time to work with, maybe you could explore it in a way that doesn't feel quite so thrown together, situations that defy logic and don't make a lot of sense about how the humans would get out there. But, for me, just looking at, so these were descendants of humans. How many generations went by? And they can't explain this in the episode, of course, but the face that we see looks just purely human. So were all these scientists just living on the ship for all of these centuries and only breeding with one another, and they never interbreeded with any aliens, so they're still just purely humans? Like, that's stuff that's popping into my head. Like, okay, how would this work? And then how would they build this spaceship that looks like some kind of gigantic monster? Who would build that in the first place?
Yeah.
Who would come up with that idea? It looked cool. It worked for the story, both for the title and for the idea that there's this roaming beast of a ship that no one can defeat, and it eats other ships. It makes sense for all that, and I think it works well to tell an episode of Star Trek. But if you start trying to make it make sense, then you run into a lot of situations where you're like, okay, not sure that really makes sense, but anyway, but it's fine. I mean, it makes for a good episode. So
yeah, I think again, the place where this works best, right? The place where this show is best is where they're not trying to be so freaking clever. And we've talked about this ad nauseum on this show, but until they stop, we're going to keep talking about it. And I think that's a place where you do need to think more intentionally about what you're creating and the why behind it. Because one of the hallmarks of Star Trek, right, especially when Star Trek is at its best, is that it is something that feels like it could be real.
Yeah, exactly.
Even with the fantastical, and we all can, check out in the sense of like, yes, we get it. We're talking about warp drive, all these things we've never created, all that type of stuff. Yes, we understand. But at the same time, when you do a ship that has a big weird face on it and, feels like a legitimate flying monster, that makes less sense than something that is so silly, but yet feels so much more realistic, like the Doomsday Machine, right? Just this big maw of a thing that, so I think that there's something in that where they need to just be more careful in the writing. And if they do, And the reason we're saying this, and the reason I'm saying this, is that that's really where this show should be going, because that's when this show really shines. And I think the first season is a representation of when this show felt like it was more restrained.
Yeah.
And it was all the better for its restraint.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes, and anybody in VFX can tell you this, special effects can tell you this these days, that sometimes when you can do everything, having no restraints actually hurts your creativity.
Yeah. Well, that's true of any creative work. It's true of print design, anything. Yeah.
So I think that in some ways, I think that this show, if it found ways to put restraints on itself on purpose, it would be helped. And part of that is that I think that this show I haven't seen Discovery, and I haven't seen the animated one, The Prodigy, but this show, beyond most other Star Trek shows, feels like it kind of is directionless in the sense of like it can't quite figure out what it wants to be. So that's one of those reasons why they're just trying everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the places where they're, again, somewhat doing themselves a disservice too, because if they found what their focus was supposed to be and what their storytelling threads were supposed to be, I think that it would be more successful. And I think this show, this episode specifically, it had a pretty interesting through line. It kind of knew what it was trying to do, and it really does shine in that way. And even for the criticisms I'm giving here, like, I don't want anybody to miss this. I think this is a great episode. So,
So that's an interesting point. Now, Prodigy, I haven't watched all of it, but Prodigy has a clear storyline, and they know what they're doing with it, and they're taking you on a journey. Discovery versus Strange New Worlds is an interesting point because they both suffer from this, but Discovery could never figure out what it was from season to season. So each season had a clear story from start to finish. But then the next season would be not only a new story, but, they would jump. Obviously, from the second season to the third season, they jump 1,000 years into the future. And even once they're there, I felt like, each season, the show is trying to figure out what it is and what it wants to be. Whereas Strange New Worlds feels like that within a season. Like from episode to episode, you're not sure that they actually really know what show they want to make. The first season, I think you did. The first season felt like a reaction to Discovery where they were saying, okay, we understand that a lot of you don't like Discovery and you want the Star Trek that you knew from the past back. And so we're going to give it to you on the Enterprise with Pike and Spock and Uhura. We're going to give this to you. And they did. And number one, of course. And they did. And then from the second season on, they've played around a lot more. So anyway, that's an interesting point. You mentioned the Doomsday Machine. Did you have this reaction at the beginning of the episode when the beam comes down and hits the planet? I said, is that the Doomsday Machine? I thought for a moment that they actually were going to find the Doomsday Machine.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, but then quickly it turned out to be crazy monster pirate ship.
Monster human pirates. Who knew?
All right. Well, what are your final thoughts on this episode, and what is this long-awaited rating that you've been teasing since the beginning?
Yeah, Chris. Honestly, I rewatched the episode before we were recording tonight, and it honestly just kind of brought warm feelings to my heart because it was a good episode. It's these last 2 weeks when we've been talking about this show, I've been excited to talk about the show. I've looking forward to talking about the show, and it's because the episodes here have been good episodes. They've been kind of classic Star Trek episodes. They've been giving us, character growth and interesting things to think about and fun moments and wow moments and all this stuff. And I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was an excellent episode of the series, and I will say I hard-pressed not to say this hasn't been the best episode of the season. And grading specifically just for this season, I'm giving this a 4.5 out of 5 Sehlat tails that have been eaten.
All right.
Because I think this is a really good episode, and I think this is the type of episodes that shows writers, if you are more restrained, you can give us this type of material, and it's just kind of wonderful when we get it. And this is what we respond to as fans. We want good storytelling like this, so please continue to give it this. And so, I'm going to reward this episode with my highest rating of the season, and hope that the writers are listening here to saddle up, and that they
do every week, Matthew.
They do. They're waiting on bated breath to see what this is going to be. But I think it's a really good episode. So where are you with your rating on this one?
Yeah, I think I probably agree with you. It's the best episode of the season, and I think it's one of the best episodes of the series. It's not the best episode of the series, but it's up there. It really shows what the series can be, what they can do with it.
Yes.
I think, the reveal at the end of the fact that these humans left and ended up turning into something in space kind of echoes something you would have seen on the original series or on the Next Generation or even on Voyager. And so I liked that. Or even on Enterprise. We just talked about North Star a while back on Warp 5, and now they didn't willingly leave Earth, but they are humans who ended up having to find their way elsewhere in the galaxy. So, no, I thought it was great. As always, the acting is great. The visuals are great. I thought they did a good job of utilizing a lot of characters in this episode and giving everybody a chance to do something, and it gave us an interesting story. So I'm going to give this an Atari 2600 with 10 cartridges and 2 joysticks.
Man, better start blowing on those cartridges.
Don't worry, they've been boxed up in Pelia's quarters.
Oh, that's true.
They are in good condition. So, all right, everyone, we would love to hear your thoughts on the Sehlat who ate its tail. There are many ways for you to share those with us. Perhaps the easiest way is to go to Facebook and join the Babel Conference. That is our listeners group. It's there to extend the conversations beyond the podcasts. So if you're joining for the first time, please do answer the questions and agree to the rules of the forum so that I can let you in. You'll find a post there on the timeline for this episode, and you can share your thoughts with Matthew and me and fellow listeners right there. Of course, you can also send us email. Go to our website, trek.fm/contact. Use the form you find there, choose to send to a show, and choose Saddle Up, and that'll come right on over to us by email. And you can find us everywhere in social media. Our username is TrekFM. Now, Matthew, when you're not taking that half of a tail that you saved from your rating and eating it yourself, where can people find you?
Oh, sorry. My mouth was full. You can find me all over social media under the name Matt Rushing02, of course, here on the network, outside all the great Star Trek we're doing. You can also find me over in the 602 Club, doing a bunch of fun things, talking about all the franchises we love. And, in fact, we've got a brand new bonus show there called The Indie Files, going through all of the Young Indiana Jones series, plus all of the Indiana Jones books. So just kind of celebrating that character. So we hope you'll join us there. And then over on the Nerd Party Network, I've got a couple of shows. One is called Owlpost, about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, and talking about Star Wars with the great John Mills over on Aggressive Negotiations. But Chris, when you're not trying to figure out just where you're going to get all that copper wiring from, where can people find you?
I have a team. They're salvaging it from all kinds of places.
Just Just working on it right now.
Right now. Just keep it quiet. We're not supposed to be doing that. You can find me elsewhere on the network doing all those shows with you, of course. You can find me in social media. My username everywhere is C. Bryan Jones, letter C, and Bryan with a Y. Blue Sky is where I'm most active these days, but you can send me a message wherever you are, and I'd love to chat with you there. And if you'd like to help us keep this show and everything that we're doing on the network going, we could definitely use your help. To find out how to support the network, how to get involved, please visit patreon.com/trekfm. That's patreon.com/trekfm. We would not be here without your help, so thank you so much to everyone who is supporting us now. Well, Matthew, next week, we're going to answer that big question that's been on our minds for the last, 50-something years. What is Starfleet?
Finally. Hit it.